Josh Gerben, founder of the Gerben Law Firm, a trademark law firm, keeping an eye on, things the XFL's doing in regards to the team names and who else knows what. They got a lot of stuff they have to pin down building this league. And Josh, you had a really informative video based on the Seattle names that were trademarked for the XFL. We had the Surge, the Force, the Dragons, the Fury, and the Wild. We discussed it on our show last week. How does this process work for the XFL, and how do you come across these filings?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. The filings that were made by the XFL were made based on what's called an intent to use with the trademark office. And what that means is that they can get these filings in and secure a priority date as of the filing date for these names, as then the process would unfold as to the final selection of a name. So presuming that they've whittled it down to these 5 names and they just weren't sure yet, or maybe they're trying to throw people off the trail of the exact name and wanted to get some protection in place, that is typically why you would make, filings at this stage. But of course, we've only seen filings through the entity with the trademark office for the Seattle names and none of the other teams at this point.
So there's a lot of gamesmanship that might be going into this, trying to throw fans and maybe competitors off the scent of what the team name is. Also, it's got to be a complicated process. I mean, fans would believe, because they've been clamoring for names, Josh. Anytime we do any kind of content, the first thing anybody asks, even if it's not related to team names, is where are the team names? Is this the most complicated part of the team building process, you think, for the XFL? And if so, what makes trademarking a team name and identity so difficult?
Well, I think certainly it's a major part of the process, right? And anytime, a team name, everybody's going to have an opinion on that. And I think the XFL has in the past had very sort of creative names, and for example, you had the Rod Smart and He Hate Me, and that is, that's always just sort of been the moniker of the XFL, right? So I think there's probably a decent amount of pressure on them that come up with some pretty good names here. And one of the things we saw on Twitter last week is once we posted this news and it started making the rounds, on everybody's Twitter feed, and it was getting reposted, there's a lot of opinions, being put out there on these 5. And I was waiting for someone to sort of do a definitive Twitter poll, although I don't think I've seen one yet. But perhaps the XFL is getting some sort of free market test by putting these names out there and letting the Twitterverse sort of comment on it to get some feedback.
If I wanted to announce my team name tomorrow, how long do I need to register my team name prior?
So the total trademark application process typically takes between 8 to 10 months. It's a very long process. What will happen is once you submit an application like the XFL did, it takes about 4 months for the U.S. government agency here, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, to pick up and even review the filing. So the idea in, again, getting these filings in is you sort of reserving rights as of the filing date, but this is a very lengthy process. Mm-hmm. And during that process, any one of these names could be refused by the government if there's a similar name out there somewhere in the world. So, if there's another Fury for a sports team or a football team, that could cause a conflict and prevent the XFL from ultimately registering the names. So there is some risk in sort of starting this process sort of this late in the game, in the sense that obviously they can do their own trademark searches and the Trademark Council can provide an opinion on the name, but that is not a perfect science. And so there's always going to be some risk here that any name that's chosen might have a conflict with another trademark at some point in the process.
And so with team names, if Seattle is the only franchise where we have seen trademark filings, how could the other 7 names be getting team names if there's nothing filed yet? Do you think they're just being counseled on other names that they think they're going to be cleared on? Or how will that work if you're saying this process takes 8 months and they're telling fans announcing team names within the next month?
Absolutely. So you are not required under any law in the United States to have a federally registered trademark to use a particular name, whether it be for a clothing brand or for a football team. And so they can certainly move forward with the selection of the names and using the names in the marketplace and, playing games under the team names that are not yet federally registered. They'll have the pending applications and go through that process during the course of the coming year. And that is just sort of the risk in starting the naming, or, getting the names filed for trademarks so late in the game. They could have filed the trademarks, let's say, back in January and already had a lot of the process complete and had some certainty around how the government was going to handle their applications. But because they are waiting until the last minute to make any trademark filings and make any other type of announcement, they're going to just sort of accept that risk that as they go through the trademark process, there could be some problems in getting the registrations. Of course, there may not be. We're just speculating at this stage, but that would be the risk you're undertaking here if you're the XFL.
Okay, so, and you said that the league could use one of those 5 names for Seattle or none of them. And in that case, what happens to the trademarks on those names? Does the league just hog those, or do they kind of just go back into a pool and they're open again for someone else to file?
So it would be the latter. In order for these names, any one of these names, to actually register as a trademark, the XFL would have to file something called a proof of commercial use. They'd have to prove to the USPTO that they're actually commercially using the name. And that goes for any trademark that's ever filed. So in this case, you're able to make the initial filing to reserve rights. But at this stage, think of it as like a pending trademark, or, some people know patent pending. That's some language people have heard before. So think of it like that. These are just pending applications. These are not registered trademarks at this point. So if they were to, whatever names they do not use, as you mentioned, these applications would just then abandon, and anybody else could theoretically pick them up and use them for a football team at some point.
And the league has said that most likely the old XFL team names won't be used. That maybe one or two of them. They haven't officially announced that yet. But could the league use their own old XFL team names, or maybe perhaps USFL team names or team names from other defunct spring football leagues, or would those create trademark issues?
That's a great question. Now, as far as the old XFL names, presuming that the ownership of the current XFL is somewhat similar and perhaps owns some of the residual rights in those names, that likely is not going to be an issue. As far as other leagues and the names that might have been used in the past, there would be in most cases, the XFL could probably pick up and use some of those names if they're just completely not being used anymore. Under trademark law, though, there is this idea of sort of residual value in any name that might have been popularized at some point. And so you have to be a little careful in using names from old teams that were from different leagues, where there could be the potential for some legal claims for whoever the residual owners of those trademarks might be. So that would be something that would have to be looked at pretty carefully by the XFL's lawyers if they were going to go in that direction.
And say they know the residual, whoever owns the residual rights to that team name. Say, for instance, Tampa Bay Bandits is one that's been popular and talked about. Could the XFL separately just make a deal with whoever owns that team name and identity right now before, and even avoid just trademark filing it, and maybe just give them some sort of kickback or a deal based on rights?
Absolutely. So trademarks are are actually a property right. So they're intangible property, meaning you can't hold them or feel them, but they can be bought and sold or licensed. So you could easily go and purchase trademark rights from somebody. You could even license the rights, although, in this case, I think the XFL would rather an outright purchase. So that would certainly be a possibility if they wanted to clear legal title to a particular name.
There we go. So the Tampa Bay Bandits are still alive. For some reason, it doesn't look like I'm going to get my Seattle Sasquatches, Josh. But, oh well, the 5 names that you found were pretty good. Have you...
you never know.
Last question. If you wanted to break any news, or if you've seen anything, have you seen any other XFL trademarks filed anywhere that we should be aware of?
So I have looked to see if there's been any other names filed anywhere, because one of the things the XFL could do if they were really trying to hide the ball is they could file the names in another country first. So let's say they filed the trademarks in the UK and not in the US. As long as they filed the U.S. trademarks within 6 months of those UK filings, they would get the priority date that they got in the UK. So basically, all these countries, there's a treaty that says, hey, look, if you file a trademark in one particular country that's a member of the treaty, so long as you file it in any other treaty member within the next 6 months, your priority date goes all the way back to the filing date in the original country. So major companies have used this tactic, like Apple Computer does it a lot, where they're going to launch a new product in the U.S. and they go file a trademark in some obscure country, and nobody really sees the filing, so they can get their priority situated on the trademark without ever having to announce the name. And we've tried to use some technology. We've used to go through various databases in different countries to see if we could see if they were doing that, and we did not see anything. But if your listeners wanted to have some fun and go on a scavenger hunt, you could look at various trademark databases around the world looking for anything filed by Alpha Entertainment, which is the entity that the XFL has been using, at least here in the U.S., to file their trademarks. So that is just sort of something we've been trying to keep an eye on, because that would be another way to sort of hide the ball here, but we haven't been able to uncover anything.
That sounds like a pretty fun activity if you're going to be indoors a little bit over the 4th of July. I'd encourage our listeners to do that for sure. I know they want to know the team names, Josh, and the XFL is apparently doing a great job of keeping those under wraps until the big reveal, I guess.
They are, because I get questions all the time. Hey, Josh, obviously we're doing a lot of sports-related trademark posts, and everybody's been asking me what I'm seeing, and I keep saying, we've been looking. Trust me, we know there's a lot of interest here and haven't seen anything. The only other thing I'll put out there for your listeners, that we actually put something out about a month or so ago. The XFL is pursuing a trademark on "He Hate Me."
Yeah.
And that to me is sort of an interesting thing. Obviously, there was some rather sad news about Rod Smart and the other week that came out, but the XFL has been moving forward trying to protect that name. I think just because it's been so ubiquitous with the league over the years, and that is a pending application they have as well for a trademark.
Well, let's hope he also gets a bronze statue somewhere as well. He deserves it, being the icon of the league that he is. Josh
Absolutely.
Gerben, thanks so much, man. We appreciate all the insight into the world of trademark law, because in the league building process, this is an important part of it, and we wanted to give fans kind of an explanation of why the team names are taking so long and what's the process behind picking those names, and I think you really helped us out a lot, man. So happy 4th of July to you, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you so much. Happy 4th to you as well.
Thanks for watching and listening, XFL fans. Don't forget to tell us what you think in the comments below, or even better, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all things XFL. Check out some of our other videos and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at XFL Show. This is the XFL Show, is a production of Pretty Easy Podcasts.